Hi guys, it's me, Chazar HD, and welcome to the second half, really, of the Formula One season of 2024. The summer break is thankfully over, and we are back here at Zandvoort for another edition of the Dutch Grand Prix. Last year's Dutch Grand Prix was wet and wild, I think is a good way of putting it. It was spiced up quite a lot by the wet weather. If it wasn't for the wet weather, I think it would have been a pretty boring weekend last year. But this weekend's race, even if dry, which looking at qualifying and definitely the race looks as though it is probably going to be dry, we have got a super competitive weekend on our hands, especially when it comes to the fight for pole position, where you have Max Verstappen, of course, the home driver, going up against McLaren and Mercedes, and of course their respective drivers in the fight for pole. And with those, McLaren and Mercedes drivers, with Max as well, there is not going to be really a lot at all separating those five drivers. So this could be, today, one of the best qualifying sessions of the season so far. Hopefully it is. Be a great way to come back from the summer break. And yeah, very much looking forward to this qualifying session. Definitely not settled as to who is going to end up on pole position, when again, this time last year, it was a bit boring, to be honest, because I think we all knew who was going to end up on pole position, and of course it was a year ago Max Verstappen, the home driver, on pole by, I think, was it half a second or something ridiculous like that, which is incredible considering it's only a 1 minute 10 lap time. But yeah, gonna be an exciting day today, no doubt about it. And even if you look into the midfield looking very close with, Aston Martin, Haas, Racing Bulls, Williams are in there as well. Williams look to have improved after an upgrade, which is good to see from them. And also, we'll get into Ferrari in this build-up to qualifying, because at the minute, they look like they're probably in the midfield rather than fighting at the front, which is desperately sad, given how they ended, I guess you could say, the first half of the season going into the summer break. But hello to all of you guys. Hope you're well. I did upload my mid-season review finally a few days ago. And the reason, as I explained in the, I think, pinned comment that I put up for that, or in the comments of that video, the reason that mid-season review came out later than planned is because, one, it took a bit longer to edit than I expected, but mostly it was because I was pretty ill. And if you are wondering why my voice might sound a bit different, it's because I'm still suffering the after effects of whatever illness I had. And I still don't know exactly what illness I had. You may, in the couple races before the summer break, you may have heard me like coughing a lot, and, just clearing my throat a lot. And that was the beginnings of whatever illness I really suffered from quite badly, say a week after the summer break began. So this would have been like, a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, and then when we got to the summer break, obviously I was, I recorded the mid-season review, started editing it, and then for about a week, I couldn't edit it at all because I was just so ill, literally bedridden for days. And like I said, still don't know officially what was wrong with me. My best guess is it was either bacterial infection in my throat, or according to my doctor, they believe it could be, I think, glandular fever. But the reason I've not been tested for it is because really I can't be bothered to be tested for it, especially once I found out that even if you test positive for it, there's nothing they can do. There's no treatment for it. So whether I have it or not is irrelevant if there's no treatment for it. So it's probably one of those two things. But yeah, it was pretty bad. Like I said, a couple of weeks ago, I was in very bad shape. My tonsils were 4 times bigger than they should normally be. They were so big that at times I was choking on my own tonsils. What I thought I was choking on was phlegm that wasn't coming up and it was stuck in my throat. It wasn't that. It was actually my tonsils I was choking on because they were so big, they were like halfway blocking my airway. And if they got any bigger, I probably would have had to have emergency surgery. It was that bad. Thankfully, I was able to get that down with lots of ice cream. And I think also the illness probably a couple weeks ago peaked at the same time that I started to have lots of ice cream, which is a good way of treating inflamed tonsils. But yeah, I also, and I think I explained this in my pinned comment, but I also in public collapsed. Basically, what happened? I was out and about with someone, and yeah, I felt just so incredibly ill. I felt white all over. Just the feeling of my body was just so weird, and it got to the point where I legit thought I was dying because I was just so, there was just something clearly wrong with me. I was sweating just buckets. Really, it was incredible the amount I was sweating. It wasn't even that warm of a day. Again, I was white all over. My eyes were just black. I looked like I was on death's door, and I felt like I was on death's door. So had an ambulance out. Thankfully, they checked me over, and they said I was absolutely fine. Later discovered that the reason I ended up collapsing was because of a bad reaction to medication that I was taking to treat the pain in my throat. Because not only were my tonsils 4 times bigger than they should have been, I also had really bad tonsillitis. Like, properly, it felt like there were razor blades all across my throat. So I was taking painkillers for that, but turns out that the dose I was taking was way too strong. Way too strong for me. And yeah, basically what I had that caused me to collapse in public was I guess you could say a partial drug overdose. So yeah, I've had quite the dramatic summer break, and that's why I've not uploaded as much content as I actually was originally planning to. So apologies about that, but like I said, I've had a very dramatic summer break, and only the last probably week and a half have I been properly back to normal in terms of, the tonsils are not as big as they were. I don't have any throat pain, but my voice is now deeper than it was before, which, I mean, it's not a bad thing. All us men dream of having a deeper voice, if possible. So it's not exactly a bad thing, but of course, compared to how I maybe used to sound, it's maybe something that you guys will have to get used to. So if my voice sounds deeper than usual, there's nothing I can do about it. It's not an issue with my mic or anything like that. It's the after effects of of whatever illness I suffered. And this illness, it went on for a few weeks, so it was a proper illness. And yeah, my throat since then has just been a bit deeper, which again is not necessarily a bad thing. But the reason I've just gone through this is to let you know how my summer break has been, but also just to, I guess, warn you guys that, again, if my voice sounds different, there is a legit reason for that, and there's nothing I can do about it. I mean, maybe my voice will go back to normal in, I don't know, a few weeks' time, or maybe it'll just stay like this. I have absolutely no idea. But one thing I do hope is that you guys had a much better summer break than I have. And good to see you all here. Hope you're all doing well, no matter what time zone you're in, part of the world you're from. Hope you've had, again, a good last few weeks and having a good time at the moment. And I hope you'll join me today in enjoying what should be an exciting qualifying session at Zandvoort. But yeah, that's what I went through during the summer break. One last thing, though, before we get into the build-up, which we should start really getting into for qualifying, there is plenty to go through. Upgrades for the teams, and obviously plenty of data from yesterday's Practice 2 session. There is a poll running in the live chat where I've asked you guys, who do you think will take pole position for the Dutch Grand Prix? And your options in that poll are Max Verstappen, Lando Norris, George Russell, and Lewis Hamilton. I know you guys may say, where's Oscar Piastri? I easily could have put him in, but Piastri has not had a pole position this season, so kind of works against him in terms of me being likely to put him in the pole, because Piastri, I'd say this season has probably been better, I would say, probably in the races than qualifying. Qualifying he's done decently well, but I think the races he's actually been a tad better. So, yeah, those are the four options. Let me know for the next couple hours, who do you think will take pole position for the Dutch Grand Prix? And once we get to the start of Q3 in, like I say, a couple hours from now, I will go through your, the results of the poll and who you guys think will take pole position. Of course, I will get onto my own prediction when it comes to that pretty soon. But let's come away from all this and get into what happened yesterday in Practice 2. So, and the track conditions yesterday weren't great for the drivers. It was, I think, wet in Practice 1. Practice 2, though, thankfully, was dry. And then, yeah, George Russell ended up quickest for Mercedes-Benz. First and third as well for Mercedes. And I can't remember Mercedes being this quick on a Friday for a long time. Definitely since 2021. This is the first time I've remembered them being this quick. Normally, they're not that quick on a Friday, but then will improve quite a bit on a Saturday. And then obviously on a Sunday as well. But for them to start off so well is very, very encouraging, especially considering their form as of late. Of course, won the Belgian Grand Prix, won the British Grand Prix, and the Austrian Grand Prix. They've won 3 of the last 4 races in 2024. So yeah, Russell was P1, ahead of Piastri, second in the McLaren by just over half a tenth. Then Lewis Hamilton in third, Lando Norris in P4, Max Verstappen in fifth. Red Bull, I wouldn't say happy with their performance yesterday. And when I say performance, I mean, the pace of the car. But I think they still know that they are still right in there for the fight for pole. So if you're a Red Bull or Max Verstappen fan, don't panic too much because, he's not slow enough to the point where Max cannot get pole. It's Max Verstappen. He can do many things. So, yeah, Verstappen is absolutely in the fight. And Red Bull definitely in the fight. They're just not, as clearly quicker compared to everybody else like they were a year ago or even a few months ago. And then you have a big drop-off to Fernando Alonso in P6, Yuki Tsunoda just behind in 7th, and then Kevin Magnussen in 8th. Haas have brought a couple upgrades, so looking good there. Charles Leclerc, though, 9th for Ferrari. Ferrari having a disaster of a weekend, and we'll get into why they're having a disaster of a weekend in a moment, because it's pretty obvious why they're having a disaster of a weekend. It's because of, well, an issue we've seen for a few races now, but this issue is, what's the best way to describe it? Is affecting them worse than I think we imagined it would at this Grand Prix. Coming to this Grand Prix, I was not expecting Ferrari to be quick. I knew they would be slower than Mercedes, Red Bull, and McLaren, but for them to be 3/4 of a second off in practice and, in the midfield, that's bad. That is bad. Alex Albon then in P10. Williams have brought a few upgrades, which is good to see, and Albon definitely looking good so far this weekend. And then the rest of the order, you got Lance Stroll in P11, Sergio Perez in 12th. No surprise, Perez miles off the pace. Still cannot believe he is in that Red Bull car still. Doesn't make any sense to me in terms of, the on-track stuff. Daniel Ricciardo in 13th, Gasly 14th, Logan Sargent 15th. Sargent did have, though, a big and quite scary crash in practice 3 that meant that practice 3 that finished just over an hour ago was basically a useless session because the red flag was out for, almost the entire session. So it's going to be interesting to see if Logan actually gets out in qualifying, because his chassis would have been very badly damaged in the crash he had in third practice. And then you have Zhou Guanyu in 16th, Ocon 17th, Bottas 18th. Carlos Sainz ended up in 19th because of a gearbox problem. And Nico Hülkenberg was 20th because he had a crash in practice 2. But his car, of course, is fine today. So let's get into the sector time data just to understand, in terms of the pecking order so far, why teams are as quick as they are and why certain teams are so slow, namely the Scuderia. So Sector 1 is, I would say, the second most important sector at this circuit. It has a decent flow to it. Obviously, you have the pit straight, and then you come into turn 1, which is kind of like a fastish hairpin, I guess you could call it. And then you go into a very unusual turn 3 and 4 with quite a lot of banking. Then as you exit that, and then you're flat out towards turn 6, 7, and that is the end of the first sector. So the first sector, most of the time you're flat out, except for a couple, let's say, unique corners. And Mercedes and McLaren pretty much on the same pace through Sector 1. Red Bull not too far behind. I think Red Bull can definitely show more pace in the first sector. I would say at least half a tenth, maybe even a tenth of a second. I think they've probably got more in their pocket in the first sector. Haas, not really a massive surprise with them being up in 4th in the first sector. Aston Martin, decent first sector. Ferrari, definitely you would expect more, given the first sector is mostly flat out. Definitely should be in at least 4th position in the first sector. So, a tenth of a second really missing in this part of the track. But that's not really where Ferrari are having issues, as we'll get on to in a moment. Williams in the first sector, decent speed for Alpine as well. Racing Bulls, I mean, their pace is not that bad in the first sector, but maybe a few hundredths of a second extra could help, maybe getting both cars into Q3 later. And then Sauber, slowest of all, and Sauber, as you'll see, common theme through the sectors, their car the slowest at this circuit. But the middle sector, even though it's barely the longest sector on the track, it is definitely the most important sector, because this is the sector where the cars really get tested. It's the sector where you get to see what cars properly have good downforce, good aerodynamics. And this sector really makes your lap. Obviously, the first sector, as long as you do well enough, then that's fine through that part of the lap. As long as you don't make any big mistakes, then it's okay. And then with the final sector, the same thing. As long as you don't make a noticeable error, then it's fine. But the middle sector is really where the lap is made. And Mercedes lapping at very good speed in the second sector, sorry. A tenth of a second almost quicker than McLaren. McLaren, by the way, have brought a few upgrades here, and it is their biggest upgrade package for McLaren, I think, since Miami. But so far, I don't think we've seen the benefits of it. And I think maybe in qualifying we will. I mean, it depends on the weather conditions and just how things go. But yeah, I think we haven't quite seen if there is any gains from this upgrade. I don't think we've seen that yet. So hopefully we'll see that in qualifying or the race tomorrow. Red Bull, third quickest. Definitely, I think there's more speed in the middle sector. I don't think they could go 2 or 3 tenths of a second quicker necessarily. But again, I think at least a tenth of a second they could probably find in this middle sector, which would put them absolutely right in the fight for pole position. Aston Martin's pace and Racing Bull's pretty good, and Haas, you'd have to say, in the middle sector. So good to see them performing at a good level in this middle sector. Alpine looking okay through the middle sector. If you're an Alpine fan, you probably would have hoped they'd be maybe a tenth of a second better off in this middle sector, given that the corners are supposed to be a bit more of a strength for them rather than the high speed stuff. So yeah, not the greatest sector for Alpine, but not terrible. And then you have Scuderia Ferrari, 8th best team and half a second off the pace of Mercedes-Benz. And this is the sector where it's all going wrong. And again, as I explained earlier, the reason it's going wrong is for reasons that we already know about. Since we got to... Let me just adjust myself here. Since we got to the start of the European season, Ferrari's upgrades haven't worked. Their car, aerodynamically, is not performing on the same level as Mercedes, McLaren, or Red Bull. They just haven't stepped up a gear. They're still at the level they were at in the early races. They just haven't continued, that good early form and a good start to the season that they had. And the deficiencies they have with their car, which again is clearly less aero than Mercedes, McLaren, Red Bull, is bound to show up in this middle sector. But I did not think they would be this far off. I thought maybe 2.5 to 3 tenths of a second off, say, first place in this sector, but half a second pretty much slower than Russell and the Mercedes is extremely worrying for the Scuderia. I don't know if they're having, a similar weekend to what they had in Montreal, where for some reason they just didn't have any pace, and had, a lot less pace than even we thought possible. I don't know if it's, that type of weekend, or if this is what we maybe can expect from Ferrari going forward for the rest of the season. I really hope not, because if they are this bad at, medium or high downforce tracks, then their season's over. It really is. I mean, I know, they've got their home race next week at Monza, which, I mean, they're going to be way more competitive there. For obvious reasons, they, still have a very strong power unit, which will help them a lot next week. and their car in general is better suited, to tracks like Monza. But other than Monza, if you look at the rest of the tracks on the calendar, man, I know we've got Baku, in the tracks remaining, but there's not many tracks remaining where we've got long, powerful straights. So if this is where they're at, then, like I said, the rest of this season is pretty much a write-off, which is quite incredible to say because, going back to the end of May, which, by the way, was only 3 months ago. I know it feels a long time ago, especially if you are a Ferrari fan. They dominated the Monaco Grand Prix. They were a team that were consistently finishing on the podium. And now, I mean, I know at Spa, they ended up on the podium because of, George Russell's penalty or, disqualification. But since then, they've just been, it's like a totally different world they've been in since that Monaco Grand Prix. And if they were to end this season, in that way or in this way, then it would be as bad, you would have to say, as what Aston Martin had last season, where Aston Martin started 2023 and had, probably second best car on the grid for the first 7, 8, 9 races. And then once we got to about race 10, race 11, they just collapsed and fell into the midfield. Still had, obviously, the odd race where they were, competitive. Obviously, towards the end of the season, Fernando Alonso ended up on the podium a couple times. But with Ferrari, that's pretty much, the, what would you call it? The trajectory that they are heading in. The exact same. And that, for a team like Ferrari, with the resources they have, and, they do have some very skilled engineers, it should not be possible. It absolutely should not be possible. But that's what's happening with Ferrari. That's the simple truth of it. They just haven't improved their car during this season, and that's why they are in the position that they're in, where, compared to the top 4 teams, Ferrari are clearly the worst of them. And maybe at this point, they could be dropping into the midfield, which would be incredible if that did happen. Because I cannot remember Ferrari having that bad of a drop-off in performance. Going from one of the best teams on the grid to midfield, that would be, again, quite incredible. Sorry for the pause there, just having a quick drink. But yeah, again, we know the issues with Ferrari. They've not improved enough. The upgrades haven't worked. It's a fundamental issue of the car. And, yeah, they're not going to fix this until next season, I'm afraid. And then for the rest of the middle sector, Williams in 9th. Not really a surprise with Williams, them being that far down. We know their car aerodynamically is not that great. And then Sauber at the very back, again, not a surprise. Sauber have the worst car on the grid. And then, you have the final sector, which is the least important sector on the track. You have 3 real corners that you actually have to worry about. I mean, the first couple corners of the final sector are not that simple. It's basically a chicane. But then the final real corner they have before the banking is, very simple. And the gaps are inevitably going to be a lot smaller in the final sector. But McLaren looking good in the final sector, which is not really a surprise. Through that final corner, their car always going to be very strong because their car is very strong in high-speed corners. Red Bull looking a bit better, interestingly. Mercedes dropping off in that final sector by, a 1/10 of a second compared to McLaren, which is maybe a bit too much for Mercedes. Probably, half a tenth closer, I think they would like to be in the final sector if they are obviously quickest in Sector 1 and Sector 2. And then with Ferrari, for some reason, they are suddenly where we expected them to be in the final sector, 4th best team. I have no idea why in the first sector they weren't showing, that type of pace, but it's Ferrari. Who knows what goes on at that team? And then Aston Martin 5th. Aston Martin do look very strong in the midfield, which is good to see. Looking consistently strong as well. Haas looking good. Williams a bit better in the final sector. Racing Bulls, I think, could maybe do a bit better in this final sector by a few hundredths of a second. And then you've got Sauber and Alpine at the back. And with Alpine, the reason they were slowest in the final sector in practice 2 is because, of course, after that final real corner, you've got the banking, and obviously they open the DRS through there, and then still have the DRS all the way to the finish line. And we know with Alpine, their main weakness is straight line speed. So not really a surprise that Alpine are so slow in the final sector, but I think they probably should be a bit stronger in other parts of the track. But if we go back to the top 10 from practice 2, which is clearly the most representative session we've had so far in this weekend's Grand Prix. Again, looking at the top 3 teams, it is hard to predict who has the absolute fastest car. Mercedes, McLaren, Red Bull, all looking pretty close to one another. But I think because Mercedes normally on a Friday don't tend to be that quick, and then, like I said, improve a lot more when Saturday comes round. I think Mercedes, for them to start the weekend this strong, I think it's a very good omen. And I think, at least in qualifying trim, I think Mercedes have got the best car here. Not by a lot. I'm talking, a few hundredths of a second, maybe a tenth of a second at the absolute most. But I think Mercedes I think they've got the best qualifying car here. Followed up by McLaren, I would say second. And then Red Bull with, of course, Max Verstappen in a close third. So, yeah, Mercedes, McLaren, Red Bull. That's why I think the top 3 teams are this weekend for qualifying. In that order. And then after that, a bit harder to say. Are Ferrari the 4th best team here? I'm not sure they are. I think I'd probably have to go Aston Martin as the 4th best team. I do think, by the way, Ferrari will improve in qualifying. I don't think they're going to be, exactly as bad as they were in practice 2. But I still don't think they're going to be that great. I don't think there's going to be, a massive improvement compared to what we saw yesterday. So I would say Aston Martin, probably 4th best team. Ferrari 5th, and then after that, probably Racing Bulls in 6th, Haas 7th, Williams 8th, and then Alpine 9th and Sauber in P10. That's what I think the pecking order is this weekend. And let me know, guys, in the live chat, what are your predictions for qualifying? What do you think the pecking order is for this session? And like I said, let me know your predictions for qualifying, because right now I am going to get into my top 10 qualifying prediction for this qualifying session coming up in just under an hour's time. Of course, I will make sure to get that countdown back on screen for you guys. But let's get up my predictions. And here you go. I think just about by a few hundredths of a second, or maybe not a few hundredths, but 300ths of a second, I think it will be George Russell taking pole position for Mercedes-Benz, with Lando Norris in second, Oscar Piastri in third, Max Verstappen just behind in P4, Lewis Hamilton in fifth, and then Fernando Alonso sixth, Leclerc seventh, Tsunoda eighth, Perez ninth, and Carlos Sainz in P10. That's my top 10 prediction. Let me know in the live chat what your prediction is. Of course, you don't have to give me a top 10. You can just give me a top 3, a top 5, whatever suits you. But let me know what your predictions for qualifying are in the next, 45 minutes or so. As soon enough, I will come to you guys in the live chat. But we do have one more thing to get into before we come to you guys, which is talking about upgrades, because 6 teams this weekend have brought upgrades, so let's go through them. So Red Bull, small upgrade, a new halo and new mirror stays. Again, a small upgrade. If it's worth anything, it'll be worth probably half a tenth of a second around a track like this. For McLaren, though, this is their biggest upgrade package they have brought since Miami. And you'll remember, back in Miami, that upgrade that they brought worked massively. Of course, went on to win the Miami Grand Prix. Even though they obviously were a bit lucky to win, their pace that weekend was very, very good. And yeah, they brought a new front corner, new front suspension, new floor edge, and a new rear corner. As I said earlier, though, we have not seen yet, in terms of the data, whether this upgrade is actually working or not. So we'll have to wait till qualifying to see if it's actually going to work. But I would say, given that it is the biggest upgrade they've brought since Miami, around a track like this, if it does work to the fullest extent, it's probably going to give them an extra, quarter of a second, I would say, compared to before the summer break. So, if it does give them that, then that should be enough to probably put McLaren not just on pole position, but locking out the front row. Alpine, new front suspension, a new rear corner. Again, with them, we haven't really seen any, anything with the data to suggest they've actually improved from that. So wait and see. Williams, though, with Alex Albon in the top 10 from practice 2 yesterday, which was quite the surprise. You maybe could say it's because of this upgrade. A new floor body, new diffuser, new side pod inlet, new engine cover, and a new central air intake. This is the biggest upgrade I think they've brought all season long. And if it does give them an extra, 2 or 3 tenths of a second, then Alex Albon, similar to last season, should be able to start fighting for points on a consistent basis. For Racing Bull, it's just a new rear corner for them. Nothing special. And then for Haas, new front corner and front suspension, and also a new front wing and nose. So a decent sized upgrade for Haas. But again, this track is a bit shorter than other, say, high aero tracks. So I don't think the effect is going to be felt maybe as much, in terms of the full effect from those upgrades. So maybe this weekend that'll give Haas, an extra tenth of a second. But I think once we get to somewhere like Singapore in a few weeks' time, I think maybe you'll see the full effect of this upgrade. And the same goes for Williams and McLaren with their upgrades. So, we'll see how that works for those teams. But those are all of the upgrades that have been brought here at Zandvoort for the Dutch Grand Prix. And let me just come back here and get the timer back on the screen, as we have got 49 minutes to go until qualifying begins at Zandvoort. Of course, we'll get into a couple more things before qualifying. But for the next, say, half an hour or so, let's go through your comments in the chat and your thoughts as to what is going to happen with qualifying. Another thing, actually a couple things I need to quickly say is, one, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content like this. And as well, if you haven't already, smash our like button. Really does help the channel and the algorithm, and obviously does help show me that you guys actually enjoy the content. But just want to update you guys, because obviously next weekend we have a Grand Prix at Monza. I just want to update you guys as to the content plan for the next week. So, today, of course, I'm doing a qualifying watch-along. I will not, though, be doing a race watch-along tomorrow. Instead, the plan is, obviously, I'll watch the race along with you guys, here at home. Obviously, won't be streaming for it. But then, as soon as the race finishes, I will record, obviously, the podcast reviewing the Dutch Grand Prix. And that will be uploaded within 24 hours of the Dutch Grand Prix finishing. Because on Monday afternoon, I have something organised that I'm going to be doing in real life. So, and preferably, I'm going to try and get that podcast out, if I can, on, say, Sunday evening, even if it's late Sunday evening. So, yeah, that's when you can expect that, guys. But, yeah, even though I'm not doing a race watch-along tomorrow, what I can announce is that, of course, next weekend at Monza is the last European race of the season. And because it's the last European race, and also because it's Monza, I will be doing both a qualifying and race watch along next weekend for the Italian Grand Prix. And of course, Nib, my co-commentator, will be back on the channel next Sunday to cover the Italian Grand Prix with myself. And of course, after the Italian Grand Prix, there'll be a podcast episode from myself, reviewing the events of the Italian Grand Prix itself. So just to let you know the content plan for the next week. So like I said, stream today. Tomorrow, late tomorrow, there'll be a podcast reviewing the Dutch Grand Prix race. And then, like I said, next weekend, qualifying watch-along and race watch-along. And then the day after the Italian Grand Prix, there'll be a podcast reviewing that race at Monza. There's still plenty of content coming your way in the next week or so. But, and then, yeah, with the upcoming races after the Italian Grand Prix, where we have a back-to-back of, Baku and Singapore in mid-September, I'll let you guys know my plans for that when we get to, say, next weekend. But another thing I wanted to say as well was, and I probably should have said this earlier, but you may have noticed in the last couple of months, my streaming schedule has not been, the same as it was before. Where obviously, like last year, I was consistently doing both qualifying and race watch-alongs. I have, I guess, come to accept, given where I'm at in life now compared to where I was, 2 or 3 years ago, I cannot do qualifying and race watch-alongs consistently every race weekend anymore. Of course, if we had a championship battle going on, I would try to do more race watch-alongs. But with the season the way it is, I'm just not able to do, qualifying and race watch-alongs, like I said, every race weekend evermore, because obviously I'm at uni, and in a few weeks' time, I'm going to be starting my BA Honours media course, which is going to be tough. It's, a very important dissertation that I've got to write for that, and very important other bits of work for that course as well. But yeah, with me doing that alongside the channel, and then, after I finish uni, I'm probably going to be doing freelance media work anyway. Like I said, just with where I'm at in life compared to where I was, where, 3 or 4 years ago, I was only doing this. There was no, I didn't have anything else that I was up to. Yeah, it's just not going to be possible anymore to do qualifying and race watch-alongs for every Grand Prix, you know, during a season, especially considering, how long Formula One seasons are now. 24 races. It's ridiculous how long Formula One seasons are becoming. But that isn't to say, just to say this, that isn't to say that I'm not going to be doing race watch-alongs, at all for the rest of the season. There are going to be a few race watch-alongs between now and the end of the season that I will be doing. Like I said, next weekend at Monza will be one, and then the other ones I'll announce in due course. But like I said, I'm not going to be able to do it every race weekend, especially when I'm doing a BA Honours Media degree alongside it. And, when we start that media course in basically a month from now, I'm going to have to be right on the ball straight away, especially when it comes to what I'm doing for my dissertation, which is, massively important for the overall mark that I will, hopefully a good mark that I'll get for the course. So, yeah, that's the way things are. Like I said, though, if we do get, let's say next season, if we clearly have a title fight on our hands, of course I will do more race watch-alongs, no doubt about it. But with the way things are now, where the title is pretty much wrapped up, Max Verstappen, we know, is going to win the championship. In cases like that, there will be less race watch-alongs. But what was I going to say? In you know, with every weekend I don't do a race watch-along, I still will be doing a qualifying watch-along. So it's not like there's going to be race weekends where I'm not doing any content whatsoever, like I was, back a few months ago, for the, what was it, Chinese Grand Prix or Miami Grand Prix, races like that. So, yeah. But like I said, when it comes to each race weekend, I'll announce in due course what the plan is. But like I said, the plan this weekend is I'm streaming today, not tomorrow. But then next weekend, I'll be doing a qualifying and race watch along for the Italian Grand Prix. But let's see what you guys are having to say. And by the way, for people asking about, the weather at Zandvoort, there was rain earlier, obviously, towards the start of practice 3. But looking at the forecast, it should be dry for at least most of qualifying. The bit to watch out for is Q3. We might start to get some rain in Q3 towards the end of Q3 or, qualifying. So we'll see how that goes. But it looks like for Q1 and Q2, it's definitely going to be dry. But as I said earlier, with how, the pecking order is looking, I don't think we need a wet session to have an exciting session here at Zandvoort. I think if it's dry, bone dry, I think we'll still get an exciting session. So, yeah, we don't necessarily need the rain, is what I'm trying to say. But, yeah, qualifying underway in just under 40 minutes' time. And, yeah, currently at the track, it is, I think, just overcast and a bit windy. So, not the greatest weather, but, dry weather is dry weather. Inside 404, why do you hate sprints? Because they're just not exciting. And it's, with Liberty Media, the reason they've created the sprint is because they thought it would add extra excitement to the weekend, when I think you can argue with certain race weekends it's actually taken away from the race weekend in terms of spoiling, who has good race pace, who doesn't, and then kind of giving away, what's going to happen in the race on Sunday. So, that's why, personally, I am against sprint races, and there's other reasons, but, that's the main reason. But thankfully, we don't have a sprint race on the calendar until, let me just see. I think the next sprint race is the US Grand Prix in Texas, I believe. Let me just look. See if that's the case. And yeah, that is the case. So, yeah, thankfully, still a bit of a break from the sprint, but there are, I think, a few sprint races in the last few races of the year. We've got, yeah, sprint race in Texas, and then a sprint race in Sao Paulo, and then a sprint race in Qatar, I think, as well. Yep. And let me see if there's one in Mexico. No. So, yeah, US Grand Prix, Sao Paulo, and Qatar. Those are your remaining sprint races. Right, let's find some other comments here. Will F1 says, for their prediction, Russell to take pole ahead of Verstappen second, Piastri third, Norris fourth, Hamilton fifth, Leclerc sixth, Alonso seventh, Sainz eighth, Tsunoda ninth, and Hulkenberg in P10. Of course, we must watch out for Hulkenberg because his Q3 record is pretty good. Not just for this year, but last year as well. And yeah, Will F1 earlier saying Ferrari on for a Canada type weekend, potentially. But let's see the comments from earlier. And earlier, Will F1 also saying, all the data shows McLaren have had the best car almost every race since Miami. Again, and this is a good thing. Let me just have a drink quickly before I say any more, because my voice is going very deep again. But with McLaren, I mean, there's definitely been some races where they've had the best car. Hungary, clearly, Silverstone, Imola, you maybe could say. Yeah, there's been races where they've had the best car, but there's been other races where I'm not sure they have. For example, the Austrian Grand Prix. McLaren were fighting for that race win in the final, 15 laps or so. But that was more so because of Red Bull having a bad pit stop and also fitting tyres onto Max's car that didn't perform well. So I'm not sure at the Red Bull ring, McLaren had a faster car. If we look at the Belgian Grand Prix at Spa, I'm not sure I would say McLaren definitely had the best car there. Spanish Grand Prix, maybe you could say there. But personally, I think it was very close between Red Bull and McLaren. But I will agree, there's been a few races where McLaren have had the best car. But I'm not sure I would say almost every race since Miami they've had the best car. Not sure I would go that far. And obviously, Monaco, Ferrari clearly had the best car that weekend. Rooksfoot says, your voice still sounds a bit off, Chaz. I hope you got plenty of drinks on tap. Well, as I said at the top of the stream, because of the illness that I suffered during the summer break, which again, I don't know officially what it was. Like I said earlier, it was either bacterial infection or the doctor said it could have been glandular fever. Again, I don't know officially what it could have been, but the after effects is that now I have a deeper voice. Which again is not necessarily a bad thing, because, I think all us men would like or prefer to have a deeper voice. It's just a man thing. But whether it translates well over stream, I have no idea. But like I said, at the minute, there's nothing I can do about it. maybe in the next few weeks it'll get better. I mean, my voice doesn't sound as bad as it did a couple weeks ago. Put it that way. A couple weeks ago, I couldn't even talk normally because of how bad my tonsils were and how inflamed they were. Like I said earlier, they were 4 times bigger than normal. That's how swollen they were. And like I said, a couple of weeks ago, when I spoke, it didn't sound like me. It sounded like I had something stuck in my throat. So I sound better, but still not maybe what you guys are used to. Bravomoz saying in chat, Piastri's doing about as good as a second year will do, to be fair. I think there's probably 2 or 3 races you could say he could have done better, but I mean, mostly, yeah. I think Piastri has done most of the time, given where McLaren's car has been. I think he's done what you probably would expect of him, given who his teammate is. And let's be honest, even though, last couple races, Piastri, has got the better of Lando and deserved to, Lando is still better. Lando has comfortably outqualified Oscar this year. And even in the races, the head-to-head still favours Lando. So, like I said, mostly, yeah, I'd say Piastri's done the best he can. But as I said in my mid-season review, I do feel, especially with how good the McLaren car is right now, I do feel as though that the second half of this season, we're going to see some very good performances from him. But, Brabham saying a strange Chazar Barry White thing going on. I know. I've already had the comparisons from people that I spoke to IRL. But before I go any further, just want to repost a link of the stream out, as we have got just under half an hour to go until qualifying begins in Zandvoort. A sunny Zandvoort, by the way. So weather conditions looking good, even though it is still a bit blustery. But yeah, come join us to watch along qualifying at Zandvoort, where we have 3 teams battling for pole. And there you go. Maximus says, if Red Bull get rid of, they say Paris, but I think they mean Perez. No matter who they put in that car, it would be the same results. I mean, maybe, yeah. I mean, Max Verstappen is the best driver in the world. There is no doubt about it. So whoever you put in the car alongside him is going to get dominated. There's no, that's not a surprise, that happening. But given how bad Perez has performed, and given that, Red Bull's hold on the Constructors' Championship is definitely not secure, I don't see what there is to be lost with dropping Perez and trying out Ricciardo. Because, if Ricciardo is better than Perez, if he performs better than Perez, then great. But if he performs at the same level of Perez, then even though that's disappointing, you're not losing anything. So I heard rumors that Red Bull kept Perez in the car because of the financial influence of Carlos Slim, the Mexican, is it billionaire? I think it is. And also, dropping Perez off the grid would be bad business for the Mexico City Grand Prix. I know those rumors have been out there. I'm not sure how true those rumors actually are. I really hope there is no truth to them. But to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if there was truth to them, because Formula One is a business. So, like I said, it wouldn't be a surprise. But, like I said, there was nothing to be lost by dropping Perez and trying out Ricciardo in his place. Let me see if I can find some other comments here. Let me just scroll up. Tequila shots for Chaz. Let me keep scrolling a sec. And yeah, sorry I didn't have Oscar in the poll. But like I said earlier, Piastri, I mean, he's had some decent qualifying results this year, but he's not had a pole position. So, he's less likely to get one because, I mean, he hasn't got one so far, when maybe you could argue he should have had one so far. But, yeah. We'll see. We'll see what he does. I mean, my prediction is he will qualify in the top 3, which would still be a good result for Piastri. But let me see if I can find some other comments. Niv saying, nah, Kyle Larson is bruv. If you don't know what he's referencing, Kyle Larson, the NASCAR driver, and I guess the best NASCAR driver, claimed that he could beat Max Verstappen in NASCAR. And I don't know, did he claim that he was the best driver in the world? I'm not sure if he did or not, but I think he may have said that, Max isn't the best driver in the world. I can't remember exactly what was said. But, yeah, it's stupid. And to be honest, who cares about NASCAR drivers? I'm not saying the NASCAR drivers are untalented. There is obviously skill in what they do, but they're not comparable to Formula One drivers, Formula E drivers, IndyCar drivers, World Endurance Championship drivers. They're just not. So, yeah, it's it's a pointless comparison, put it that way, between the F1 world champion and the, I don't know, NASCAR champion, if that's what he is. Rook saying, with doing next year, the Aussies are slowly taking over. They're everywhere. Yeah, if you guys didn't know, yesterday it was officially announced that Jack Doohan will be racing for Alpine in 2025. Very happy for the guy. He's been very good in F2. And I said it a few weeks ago. He, with his performances in F2, he has earned the chance to prove himself, to prove whether he is good enough for Formula One. And, we'll find out. And luckily for Doohan, he has a great benchmark in Pierre Gasly. So, yeah, we'll see how Doohan does. I think he'll do okay. I don't think he's going to be, a top 10 Formula One driver, but I think he'll surprise people. Maybe in a similar way to how Alexander Albon surprised people when, he came into Formula One. So, yeah. We'll see how Doohan does. Looney Classic says, remember Perez is also super marketable in the USA. Max is the best F1 driver, not the best driver in the world. He would get cooked in Dakar. I think, I mean, when I say best driver in the world, I don't mean in terms of every single type of series. I mean, obviously, stuff like Dakar and NASCAR and, rallying and stuff like that. You can't really compare it. But, if you're looking at all the best drivers from F1, Formula E, WEC, IndyCar, Max is the best. And I think it's very hard to argue against that. Nib says Scott McLaughlin is the best driver in the world. No supercars bias whatsoever, as he says. Prank says NASCAR is trash on road courses, i.e. COTA. I've personally, I've not really seen NASCAR race on proper road courses, but from what I would imagine, like I said, it's not comparable to, series like F1 and IndyCar. It's just not comparable. Yanni says, I think the desert would park for Max Chaz, lol. Will F1 says, people don't understand what is happening at Racing Bulls. It's clear to me they're favouring Ricciardo. They've been giving him more of the upgrades. I don't know about that. And if you have a source for that information, that would be great. But yeah, I've not heard anything, even on Twitter. I've not heard anything in regards to Ricciardo getting favourable treatment. But right, I'll probably read out 2 or 3 more comments, and then I'll get on to a couple final things before we get on to qualifying, which is getting underway in about 15 minutes' time. Let me see if I can find some other comments here quick. Brabham says, if Daniel Ricciardo builds on the last 5 to 6 races and Perez stays the same, I'd say Daniel Ricciardo is in the Red Bull for 2025. You would think, but I think we all thought that Ricciardo would be in the car now, but he's not. So who knows what's going on at Red Bull? And that's the thing with Red Bull at the minute, is because of all the internal politics with obviously, the Horner situation. And then we've got, Adrian Newey's leaving. Helmut Marko might be leaving. Max Verstappen might be leaving. In terms of what Red Bull do with their driver lineup, who knows? Who knows? If Max Verstappen does leave for Mercedes at the end of this season, then surely Red Bull, you would imagine, would put Ricciardo in their car. But if they keep Verstappen, maybe they'll keep Perez alongside him to appease Max. Even though I know Max, is very good friends with Ricciardo, I do think Max likes having Perez as a teammate because, he's had him as a teammate for obviously the best part of his career and for quite a few years now. So, yeah, we will see what happens. But you would think Ricciardo surely will get into that car if he keeps up his form and Perez, well, keeps up his form. Looney Classic says motorsport is bigger than Indy and F1 and NASCAR, so no, you cannot call Max the best in the world. It's like calling Canelo the best fighter in the world. Again, though, when I say Max is the best driver in the world, I'm saying it in, for the motorsports that are comparable. I'm not saying it for all motorsports. I mean, when it comes to rallying, for example, who knows? Out of the current grid would be the best at that. Who knows? But like I said, when I say that, I don't mean it literally. I mean it again when it comes to the motorsports that are comparable, such as open wheel cars and sports cars. When you look at all of those series and all those drivers, I would say Max is the best in the world. Because those are the only series that I would say are comparable for the drivers. They're not too far removed, like rallying or NASCAR or whatever. So, yeah. But, right. We've got 12 minutes to go until we get into qualifying. So let me just quickly hide the timer and quickly whiz through the teams and give my thoughts as to just quickly how I think they'll perform. So Red Bull, they're in the fight for pole, but definitely don't have the best car. Max Verstappen, of course, his home race. He will give it absolutely everything to get pole, but I don't think he can get it because I just don't think the Red Bull car is playing ball enough, let's say, to give him the chance to take pole position. But it will be very close. If he pulls out the lap of all laps, then it could be enough for him to take pole. So, it's not impossible, is what I'm trying to say. For Sergio Perez, given his form, as long as he ends up in the top 10, I think that's good enough. But for Max Verstappen, yeah, pole position is possible, but I wouldn't say is super likely. We'll see how they get on. For the Scuderia, things are looking terrible. Their car just nowhere near as fast as Mercedes, McLaren, and Red Bull. Aerodynamically, suffering heavily, especially in that middle sector. To be honest, I think if they can finish up as fourth best team today, I think they would be satisfied with that, considering how bad their pace has looked so far this weekend. So, unfortunately, That's got to be their aim because they've started the weekend off so, poorly. Mercedes-Benz, though, opposite end of the scale, they have started the weekend so well. Probably the strongest start to a weekend they've had in quite a long time. First, of course, and third in practice 2. If they keep that up with the drivers they've got, there's no reason why they can't take pole position. And I do believe that they do have, at the moment, given the data we've seen, the slightly faster car compared to Red Bull and McLaren. So Mercedes, just about, I would say, are my favourites for pole position. But it is still very close with this team, McLaren, and like I said, Red Bull. McLaren, both drivers looking very competitive, which is good to see. Hopefully both drivers nail their laps in Q3. And if they both nail their laps in Q3, maybe it will be enough for pole position. We'll have to see. Obviously, it does depend on if the car is genuinely quick enough for that. And maybe it might even depend on if Lando Norris or Oscar Piastri pull out a very special lap at the very end of qualifying. They've got the pace for pole. Whether they'll get it or not, we'll have to see. Into the midfield, though, Aston Martin looking like probably best of the rest. Fernando Alonso looking good, which is good to see. And Aston Martin looking consistently more competitive, which again is good to see in that midfield. So Aston Martin should get at least one car into the third part qualifying. Most likely Fernando Alonso. And then, of course, we'll see what Stroll can do. For Racing Bulls, they've looked competitive so far. Yuki Tsunoda right in the top 10 in practice too, so watch out for him. Daniel Ricciardo might be able to get to Q3. Probably needs, though, an extra tenth and a half if he's going to be able to do it compared to what he was doing in practice 2. Yuki Tsunoda, though, watch out for him. He has had a great season and is looking very strong this weekend. Alpine, not very competitive. They brought some upgrades, but they're not really showing anything this weekend. I think the best you're going to see with Alpine is maybe getting both cars into Q2, but even that I think would be, not a massive achievement, but still an achievement nonetheless. Williams looking a bit more competitive, which is good to see. They brought a lot of upgrades this weekend, which I think is probably responsible for why Williams are showing more pace. Alex Albon was P10 in practice 2 yesterday. Keep your eyes on him. Of course, this time last year, Alex Albon qualified, I think it was 5th in the Williams car. So watch out for him. And then final couple teams. Sauber looks like they've got the worst car. And then for Haas F1, car's looking decent, but I'm not sure if it's quite good enough to get into the top 10. It might be. It's going to be very close, that battle to get into Q3 with, Racing Bulls, Aston Martin, maybe even Ferrari. So they're in the fight, but whether they'll be successful in that fight, we'll have to find out. But a reminder, guys, here is my final predictions for qualifying. Here's my top 10 with the predicted gaps. George Russell, I think, will take pole just about from Lando Norris as second, with Oscar Piastri in third, Max Verstappen 4th, Hamilton 5th, Alonso 6th, Leclerc 7th, Tsunoda 8th, Perez 9th, and Carlos Sainz in P10. And before we go any further, let me get the timer back on screen quickly, as we have got 5 minutes to go until qualifying is underway. So, a couple more minutes, and then I'll get into a couple final things before we get into the session. Of course, Q1, 18-minute long session, and looking at the weather right now at Zandvoort, it is dry, it is good weather. May not end that way, but we'll have to see. But yeah, this should be, even in the dry, this should be an exciting session and a proper three-way scrap, team-wise, for pole position, involving 5 incredibly talented drivers. As the F1 intro is playing through now. So I think I may as well just go through those last couple bits before we get into the session. A reminder of your championship standings. Max Verstappen still quite far clear of Lando Norris in second. Charles Leclerc in third. Oscar Piastri now up to P4. Carlos Sainz in fifth. Lewis Hamilton in P6. With Sergio Perez in seventh. George Russell in eighth. Fernando Alonso ninth. And Lance Stroll in P10. And then on the constructor side, Red Bull still in the lead, but not by much. 42 points. They are ahead of McLaren. And then Ferrari in third, Mercedes fourth, Aston Martin fifth, Racing Bulls sixth, Haas seventh, Alpine eighth, Williams ninth, and Sauber in P10. Before we get into qualifying, let's get into some stats regarding the top teams. Red Bull took pole position at last year's Dutch Grand Prix and have been incredibly successful here at Zandvoort ever since we came back here in 2021. Max Verstappen has taken 3 consecutive poles at Zandvoort. Max, though, hasn't been on pole in terms of starting on pole in what feels like quite a while. The last time Max started a race on pole was back in Austria. For Ferrari, they've last time they qualified inside the top 3 at Zandvoort was in 2022, and that's the only time they've qualified in the top 3 here since we returned. And Ferrari have only started once in the top 3 of the grid in the last 6 races. They have not been very good in qualifying as of late. For Mercedes, they've only qualified once inside the top 3 at Zandvoort since 2021 as well, which was back in 2021. Mercedes, though, looking for their second pole position in the last 4 races. And for McLaren, same stat line. They've qualified inside the top 3 at Zandvoort once since 2021, which was last year, where Lando Norris qualified second. And McLaren also looking for their second pole position in the last 4 races. Can they get it? We will find out. But, yeah, let me just get the countdown ready. And I'll get the countdown up when we get to the 17-minute mark. As I'm not sure if Logan Sargent in the Williams, who had a big crash in practice 3, not sure if he is going to be coming out for this session. But weather conditions, thankfully, a lot better than they were this morning. As the car's waiting in the pit lane. And there you go. Qualifying has officially begun. Like I said, I'll get the timer on screen at the 17-minute mark. But Williams looking to release one of their cars there. Didn't see what car it was, unfortunately. As we're looking through the visor camera, Max Verstappen. There's already a car on track, and it's a Haas. And looks like Nico Hülkenberg, who, like I said, this year and last year, given the car he's driving, has a pretty good record of making Q3. We'll see how that goes today. But there you go. And let me just adjust the position of the timer. And adjust it a bit more. And adjust this text as well. There you go. So 16.5 minutes to go. As Nico Hülkenberg begins his first qualifying lap. Haas should be able to get both cars into Q2, but we've seen with Kevin Magnussen, even though he looked quick in practice too yesterday, Magnussen has been eliminated in Q1 way too much. So we'll have to see how they cope. As Hülkenberg sparking away through the very fast turns 7 and 8. Now into turn 9, which is a very pedestrian corner. And through turn 10 as well. Oversteering like hell on the exit of that corner. And yeah, the handling doesn't look great on this first lap, I must say, for the Hulk. But it's good enough for him to be able to set a lap time. Remember, the best time of the weekend so far is a 1:10.7, as Hülkenberg does a 1:13.0. So, pole position as Zhou goes second. Pole position should be a low 1:10. I'd be surprised if it was a 1:09. I'd be very surprised, actually, if it was a 1:09. So yeah, say a 1:10.2, maybe a 1:10.1 at best. But yeah, I'd be surprised at a 1:09. As Carlos Sainz, who didn't get a lot of running in yesterday with his gearbox problem, is on his first flying lap. And he's got a bit of traffic ahead of him. As Pierre Gasly goes top of the timesheets. And Ocon, his teammate, who is moving to the Haas team, goes second. And Alex Albon, who's had a great weekend so far, goes quickest. So good for him. Lance Stroll now goes quickest. Given that it rained earlier, the track evolution should be, for the first couple parts of qualifying, I think pretty high. Especially given that the best lap time so far is 1:11.8 by Stroll, which is quite slow. As Carlos Sainz only goes 7th with that lap, which is very poor. Didn't see any obvious issues, though, on board the Ferrari. As we're just on board there with Leclerc, as he's just coming through the final corner. And to the line, Leclerc goes 3rd. Half a tenth slower than Stroll. As Oscar Piastri, 0.3 of a second up on Stroll. And he goes quickest. So it's Piastri, Stroll, Albon, Leclerc, and then Perez in 5th, Magnussen in 6th, and then Alonso 7th, Gasly 8th, Ocon was in 9th, now Hulkenberg in 9th, and then Ocon 10th, Sainz 11th, and then Bottas 12th, Zhou 13th, 13 times on the board so far here in qualifying 1. As Lando Norris 2 tenths up on Piastri in the first sector, as George Russell goes 8th with his first run, which obviously is not good. As Lewis Hamilton now goes quickest. Don't know how quick, but Norris behind, who's on a lap, is going slower than Hamilton. When Hamilton did a 1:11.3, which is decently quick, but I still think they could go a bit quicker for this part of qualifying. As Lando Norris goes 0.02 of a second slower than Hamilton and up to 2nd place. So Lando in 2nd, McLaren 2nd and 3rd. Of course, the only important thing in this session is getting both your cars through. But for the top teams, they want to have that confidence going into Q3 that, that they have the lap time to actually threaten pole position. As we've got some other lap times having been set. Yuki Tsunoda up to 13th. Daniel Ricciardo up to 15th. So, only drivers not to set a time. Max Verstappen, who's on an outlap. Logan Sargent in the pit lane. And I don't think Logan Sargent is going to come out onto track. As Alex Albon here on another run. And like I said, was brilliant in qualifying here last year. I remember, I think, wasn't it Q2? He qualified, or he finished up in like 2nd or 3rd place. And then, yeah, ended up, I think, P5 or P6 in Q3. And currently in 5th. So clearly loves this track. Had quite a bit of oversteer, though, on the exit of turn 10. And has not improved his middle sector. As Max Verstappen does a purple first sector. 10th and a half up on Hamilton. And Alex Albon out of the banking of the final corner to the line. And Alex Albon doesn't improve his lap time. So a wasted lap there. Valtteri Bottas improves, but only goes to 16th. He's still in the drop zone. As Verstappen now a 10th down on Hamilton after the first 2 sectors. So Mercedes still kings in the middle sector. But the final sector, Mercedes not as strong. Let's see what Verstappen does when he comes to the line. He closes the gap in lap time, but goes 3rd. Only a couple hundredths of a second slower than Hamilton. So, yeah, Mercedes in the middle sector are very quick, but might just be giving too much away in that final sector, which might cost them later on, as Carlos Sainz is driving an absolute boat out on the track. Car all over the place through turn 8, 9 and 10. Oversteer on the exit of 10. And at the minute, Carlos Sainz is not even setting a good enough time once he completes this lap This might not even be good enough to get him out of the drop zone. As Pierre Gasly's done a good middle sector. And here comes Carlos Sainz to the line. And only goes 12th. That definitely won't be good enough to get him into Q2. The Spaniard has been cursed, though, this weekend with, like I said, gearbox gremlins. Pierre Gasly goes up to 5th. Remember, Gasly has good history here. Back in 2021, he qualified and finished 4th for AlphaTauri at this track. So don't count out Pierre. As Ocon goes up to 12th. Ricciardo up to 15th. With Tsunoda in 16th. As George Russell improves, but only goes 9th. As Hülkenberg improves to P7. So your top 10 is Hamilton, Norris, Verstappen, Piastri, Gasly, Stroll, Hülkenberg, Albon, Leclerc, and Russell. And the drop zone, Ricciardo, Tsunoda, Bottas, Zhou, and Sargent as Perez here. Impeded by Lewis Hamilton on the exit of, or the entry of turn 9. As Perez says on the radio, what the fuck is this idiot doing? Hamilton, I think, tried to get out of the way, was probably informed too late. And, well, he said on the radio I was well out of his way. And Bono responded, yep, no sweat. Not sure if the stewards will agree, but we'll see on that. As we're looking at Carlos Sainz, who's come into his pit box. And obviously we'll go back into the garage for quick refueling and new tyres. But Sainz is on the cusp in 15th. And clearly it's not got any confidence in the car. And I'm not, well, Leclerc hasn't really either. He's in P9. But it is surprising with what do you call it? George Russell, only P10, obviously was fastest in practice 2 yesterday. Not quite sure where his speed is right now, but Mercedes will hope that he can unlock it. By the way, remember, I have a poll running at the top of the live chat where I've asked you guys, who do you think will take pole position for the Dutch Grand Prix? Will it be homeboy Max Verstappen? Or will it be Lando Norris, George Russell, or Lewis Hamilton? Let me know in that poll. There is, probably another half an hour running on that poll. So if you haven't voted yet, make sure to do so. As Lance Stroll has exited turn 10, about to complete the middle sector. And Stroll has not improved his middle sector, but he's up in 6th place and his lap times are still good. Quite a bit quicker than Alonso. As Stroll has a good final corner. And let's see what his lap time is when he gets to the start-finish line. Here he comes. He goes up to 4th. Also, need to remember Stroll. Not last year, but the year before, 2022, had a pretty strong weekend here. Where he looked like he was going to qualify in 6th or 7th place. And then he had a car problem in qualifying, which cost him. So, Stroll also not too bad around this circuit. But, yeah, all the cars now filtering out onto track. Except, of course, Logan Sargent, who will start tomorrow at the back. Probably from the pit lane. May as well. But Max Verstappen we're looking at on the broadcast in 3rd place. He's a second ahead of the elimination zone, so he doesn't need to worry about that. The lap time he's already done is good enough, I think, to see him through. But he wants to get a better lap in to give him confidence for later on in Q3. as quite a queue in the pit lane as we enter the final 3 minutes of Q1. And the Racing Bulls and the Saubers are the drivers or the teams that need to get their act together in these final 2.5 minutes, with both of their cars heading out in Q1. Not really surprising for Sauber if that happens, but for Racing Bulls, that would be a disaster. As Verstappen, not the greatest turn 1, but he gets through it. Now into turn 2 and 3. And let's see what his first sector time is. His first sector earlier was very good. And this one, not a personal best. Like I said, turn 1 was not great for Verstappen. So I'm not sure if this will be an improved lap time. He's still going to push though, of course. As he understeers wide at turn 9. And gets oversteer on the exit turn 10, but not as much as what others have been having. And yeah, not improving the middle sector. So this is not going to be an improved lap for Verstappen, and he backs off. As Zhou Guan Yu has not improved in the middle sector. Neither has Bottas, even though he's up on Carlos Sainz through the middle sector. As Kevin Magnussen has done a decent middle sector. Here comes Zhou Guan Yu, stays in 19th. And Valtteri Bottas goes up to 15th, but I'm not sure. Well, that definitely won't be good enough to get him into Q2. Kevin Magnussen goes up to 6th. That will be good enough to get K-Mag through. As here is Carlos Sainz in the drop zone for Ferrari. Can he avoid disaster for the Scuderia? His first sector so far good enough. As the Ferrari bottoming out heavily. In turn 7, Alex Albon goes up to 4th. As Tsunoda gets out of the drop zone and goes up to P7. And Ricciardo out of the drop zone. He goes to 13th, but I'm not sure if that'll be good enough for Ricciardo. As here comes Carlos Sainz through the final corner. Surely, as Alonso goes up to 4th, surely Sainz has done enough. Yes, he has. He goes quickest on a 1:11.3. Brilliant job. As George Russell has now done a purple middle sector. Fernando Alonso has gone up to 5th as the checkered flag has now fallen. These are your final laps. Leclerc goes up to 2nd. So Ferrari 1-2, but not for long, as George Russell, by 0.3 of a second, goes quickest. And now Sergio Perez, who was in the drop zone, goes quickest. So the track ramping up a lot. And yep, those are the final lap times. And looks like everyone is done. And it looks like we have drivers eliminated in Q1. But let's go through the drivers going through to the second part of qualifying. Sergio Perez, George Russell, Carlos Sainz, Charles Leclerc, Lewis Hamilton, Lando Norris, Max Verstappen, Fernando Alonso, Alex Albon, Lance Stroll, Oscar Piastri, Yuki Tsunoda, Kevin Magnussen, Pierre Gasly, and Nico Hülkenberg. And knocked out in Q1, Daniel Ricciardo, Esteban Ocon, Valtteri Bottas, Zhou Guan Yu, and Logan Sargent. And let me just get things ready here for Q2, which of course will be underway in 2 or 3 minutes' time. Sargent being eliminated, I mean, that wouldn't have been a surprise even if he had done the session, to be honest. The two Saubers being eliminated, 18th and 19th, again, no surprise. Esteban Ocon being eliminated, I don't think is a surprise either, but I will say that Ricciardo being eliminated is a surprise, because that Racing Bulls car definitely is better than 16th place. So, yeah. A poor showing there for Daniel Ricciardo. As Yanni's saying on the chat, Ricciardo's days are gone. Let's remember, guys, last Grand Prix in Spa, he finished in the points and was good in qualifying as well. So, let's not overreact. He's had, he's not had too many, great races this year, but as of late, I think he's done well. Not, as well as maybe he could do if he was the Ricciardo of his prime, but he's not. So, yeah. But yeah, Q2 will be underway shortly. And of course, let me get out the next dotted line. And of course, anyone between those two dotted lines and the end of Q2 will be out in those positions, 11th to 15th. So, yeah. Let's see who will fall foul of the cut-off zone. I think one of the Haas's will. Probably one of the Aston Martins I can see getting eliminated. Gasly as well being eliminated. So I think there's a couple spots up for grabs. Well, not up for grabs, but there's a couple spots that, we could see a couple surprises. But like I said, Gasly, Magnussen, and Stroll, I think, likely to be eliminated in this part of qualifying. As I've just seen some beautiful news in the football that Manchester United have conceded a late winner to Brighton, which has certainly made my day better, especially with my throat. But yeah, Q2 will be underway in a moment. We're just seeing some SkyPad analysis from Anthony Davidson comparing, I think, Verstappen and Hamilton, or Verstappen and Russell. No, it's Verstappen and Hamilton. Or no, Perez and Hamilton. They're looking at the incident, which I think the stewards might want to take a look at that. I'm not saying they should punish Hamilton, but it's something the stewards probably will review after the session. So, yeah. We shall see how that plays out. But, yeah, the top teams, probably except Ferrari, should be fine in this session. Mercedes, McLaren, and I mean, even, we say Red Bull when we mean Max, but even Perez really should be getting through to the top 10. because the car is easily good enough for it. Ferrari, though, even though they did some good laps at the very end of qualifying, before then, they weren't looking that comfortable. So don't get too comfortable, I guess, if you're a Ferrari fan. As talking of Ferrari, they are the first 2 cars on the circuit. Sainz first, followed by the Monegasque, who ended up on the podium at Spa, and remarkably is still 3rd in the championship, but I'm not sure that's going to last. As Oscar Piastri is, I think, 10 points behind, is he? Or 15, something like that. So, yeah. And there you go, timer on screen, 14 minutes to go in Q2. Yeah, Leclerc, I think 5th in the championship is doable, but 3rd, that would be an incredible effort if Leclerc finished 3rd in the championship, given the car he's got, by the looks of it, until the end of the season, compared to the McLaren. As here comes Carlos Sainz down the pit straight into turn 1, and car looked pretty settled through turn 1. But the first sector, it's not really the issue for Ferrari. It's the middle sector. That's where they're losing all that time. Half a second they were losing yesterday to Mercedes-Benz. If that continues today, then they are in trouble. As Sainz through turns 7 and 8, car looks fine. No issues. I think it's when they get here to turn 9 and 10, the car just isn't stable enough. It looks better through turn 9 than it did previously, though. And turn 10. Oh, big snap of oversteer for Carlos. That's going to cost him at least 2 or 3 tenths of a second. We'll see what his lap time was. The best lap time of Q1, I think, was, what was it, a 1:11.0? So let's see what this lap time is for Sainz. Probably not going to be as good. No, 1:11.8. Horror show from the Spaniard. He'll be in the drop zone once everyone sets their laps. And Leclerc doesn't do that much better. Only a couple tenths of a second quicker. They are most definitely on used tyres, but still not good laps. As we're just looking at a slow-mo replay of Sainz having that big snap of oversteer on the exit of turn 10. May have gone quicker than Leclerc if it wasn't for that. But we've seen the Ferrari have a snap of oversteer, like a big snap, at that corner almost every lap. It does. As we're getting other cars on the track now. Verstappen, Albon, Piastri, Magnussen, Hulkenberg. And looks like Lando Norris about to come out as well. And also Lance Stroll, as Max asking, still rain in the air? And his engineer says that's correct. And there is rain coming in from the coast, actually coming in from the UK, by the looks of it, direction-wise, from, say, the East Coast. And there looks to be a heavy band of rain, but we know it's coming. It's going to hit the track. What we don't know is, will it hit the track before the end of qualifying? It might do, it might not. We'll have to wait and find out. But it is getting darker at Zandvoort. Clouds gathering. As here is Oscar Piastri with his first time to run in Q2, was second in practice 2 yesterday. Keeping up his good form as of late and a brilliant first sector. Almost half a second quicker than Leclerc in the first sector alone. Obviously, Ferrari, surely they were on old tyres. As Piastri is coming through turn 10 here. And not having a snap of oversteer. Showing you the difference between the two cars, McLaren versus Ferrari, as Piastri almost 1 second up on Leclerc on the lap so far. This is going to be probably the best lap time of the weekend so far once he gets to the start-finish line. Here comes Oscar Piastri to the line. And it is a 1:10.5. The best lap time we've seen all weekend. As Hulkenberg goes second. And that, I don't think is that far away from what I think pole position will be. Like I said, a 1:10.1, 1:10.2 is what I think pole will be. As Alex Albon goes 5th. Max Verstappen on a lap, but he's a couple tenths of a second down on Piastri. As Magnussen goes 2nd. For Haas. And now Verstappen goes 2nd on a 1:10.8. 3 tenths down on Piastri. As Lando Norris now goes quickest by 9 thousandths of a second. 1-2 for McLaren by a comfortable margin. Max 3 tenths behind, which around a track this short is a lot. As Pierre Gasly goes 6th for Alpine. As Perez goes into 5th. As we now witness Fernando Alonso coming to the line, and he now goes up to 6th place. As we await the two Mercedes, who are clearly slower than the McLarens on this lap so far. As Tsunoda pops up into the top 10. And George Russell goes 3rd. Does a purple final sector. Only half a tenth slower than Norris. And Lewis Hamilton goes 5th, half a second behind Norris. So not a good lap at all for Lewis Hamilton, as Stroll has gone up to 6th, once again faster than Alonso. As Leclerc here on another lap. And Leclerc goes up to 6th, clearly on fresh tyres. But that's still not the greatest lap from Leclerc, even on fresh tyres. So, work to do at Ferrari. But your current top 10, with 6 minutes to go in Q2, it is Norris, Piastri, Russell, Verstappen, Hamilton, Leclerc, Stroll, and then Perez in 8th, Alonso 9th, and Carlos Sainz in 10th. And then in the drop zone, it is Magnussen, Gasly, Tsunoda, Hulkenberg, and Albon. So the top 5 teams have got all of their cars going through to Q3 as it stands. As Yanni says, the UK should keep its reign. This is unacceptable. Indeed, we've just actually had a big storm here in the UK. A lot of wind and rain, which is now moving into Europe. So, yeah. Let the Europeans have it. We've suffered. But looking at that distant shot over Zandvoort from the helicopter, I can't see, any rain in the distance. There's darker clouds, but I can't see rain coming yet. So like I said, if rain does come in Q3, it's going to be probably right at the end. As there's the young fans on the broadcast waving to get themselves on the broadcast. And on this date, F1 is letting us know, on this date in 2003, 21 years ago, Fernando Alonso won his first F1 race in Budapest. That is how old Fernando is. 21 years ago today, he won in Hungary. And what a drive it was. Won by, I think, about 20 seconds ahead of Kimi Räikkönen in the McLaren, who was contending for the championship that year. And he even lapped Michael Schumacher in that race. Probably the most famous thing about that race. And in that year, that was really the race that turned the 2003 championship around, as Ferrari, were a completely different animal after that race, especially once they got the tyre regulations altered to suit them, which definitely wasn't corrupt. But that was 21 years ago. Who cares? As all the cars are coming out on track now. And we're looking on the broadcast at Sergio Perez. He's had it's hard to say he's had a good session so far, but compared to the last 2 or 3 he's had, it feels like he's had a good session. Obviously in Hungary and Silverstone, he ended up crashing out in, was it Q1? So, yeah, it does feel like he's had a good session, even though he isn't. He's still miles off his teammate and could still get eliminated. He is in 8th place. So, yeah, that just shows you how bad Perez has been this season. That what he's doing right now feels like a good performance. But Ferrari, for me, as we enter the final 2 minutes here, Ferrari are the ones to look out for. Leclerc in 6th, Sainz in 10th. Definitely at risk, Ferrari, of getting a car eliminated. As we're looking here at Pierre Gasly, who has started his final run in Q2. If he can drag this Alpine into Q3, that would be one of the drives of the day, without doubt. Let's see if he can do it. Of course, Gasly finished on the podium here last year. I forgot. Here at Zandvoort in a crazy race. And a good first sector for Gasly. 1/4 of a second up on the Spaniard Sainz. Not a great turn 9 though. Bit of hesitation on the turn in. Turn 10. Takes a nice wide entry. And swings it back in. And 1/2 a second up on Sainz. So this is a good lap for Gasly. And I think you'd have to say for Gasly, this lap is probably the absolute maximum of what he can do. So you can't really complain with the effort from the new number 1 at Alpine really moving forward as he comes to the line and he goes up to 5th. Brilliant lap, and that might just be good enough to get him through to Q3. As Yuki Tsunoda now goes up to 6th. Finally, showing some pace, Racing Bulls. Sergio Perez goes 4th. I think that probably will be enough for Perez, as Lance Stroll has done a purple first sector. But Carlos Sainz. Middle sector, not great, as Alex Albon goes up to P5. What a lap for Albon. As Alonso up to 8th. Carlos Sainz only 9th. I'm not sure that's going to be enough with Hamilton and Leclerc in the drop zone behind him. Still on laps. And Lance Stroll as well. Lance Stroll goes up to 4th. Here comes Lewis Hamilton. Only 11th. Hamilton out in Q2 and Toto Wolff in disbelief as Leclerc goes up to 6th. And there you go. Lewis Hamilton, who after yesterday looked like he might be a contender for pole, ends up in 12th place. What a disaster. Even Toto Wolff, you saw the reaction on the broadcast. He couldn't believe it. How on earth has that happened? But it has. And so has Carlos Sainz being eliminated as well. But let's go through your drivers on their way to Q3. Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri, George Russell, Lance Stroll, Sergio Perez, Charles Leclerc, Alexander Albon, what a job by him, Max Verstappen, Pierre Gasly, Fernando Alonso, and knocked out in Q2, Carlos Sainz, Lewis Hamilton, Yuki Tsunoda, Kevin Magnussen, Nico Hülkenberg, and then Kevin Magnussen. Wow. Carlos Sainz getting knocked out is a shock, but it's not a massive shock given that, Ferrari have not been that quick this weekend. But Lewis Hamilton, winner of 2 of the last 3 races, out in 12th place in a car that is right in the fight for pole. How has he done that? And even though I did rate Lewis Hamilton highly in my driver rankings, I have to say, his race performances have been good, but his qualifying performances this year, especially compared to his teammate, nowhere near good enough. Nowhere near good enough. But there you go. It should be fun watching him come through from 12th. Maybe if the race is crazy enough, he'll get on the podium, but I doubt it. I think the best he could do from there, probably finish in 5th. But even that is going to be, it's going to have to be a great drive even, to come back to finish in 5th. Given the amount of cars he'll have to overtake. But as I said, good job, Lance Stroll, very quick at the end there. Alex Albon, once again, super effort, and also super effort from Pierre Gasly. That lap, we were with him on that lap, and it was a great lap. Really great lap. And Gasly, definitely one of the drivers of the day, along with Albon, of course, and whoever takes pole, which we will find out hopefully in the next 15 minutes, who will take a very important pole here at Zandvoort. Because remember, it is pretty hard to overtake at this track. So, pole position is, half the job, if not most of the job at this track. And the last 3 years, the pole position man has won the race. So, we will see. Can McLaren look out the front row and essentially guarantee a race win? Or can George Russell do what I predicted him to do and take pole? Or will home driver Max Verstappen pull out a godly lap to take it? We will find out. But Anthony Davidson reviewing Lewis Hamilton's lap to see where it all went wrong. And turn 9 didn't get anywhere near the apex, did Hamilton. And then turn 10 didn't quite get into the apex there either. So, yeah, the car just not gripping up when he needed it to. But still, no excuse. He should not be P12. Was it last year he qualified 13th here? In a much worse car? So, clearly he's not a fan of this circuit, is he? Could have won here a couple years ago had he been a bit luckier. But, yeah. But let's see what his teammate can do. George Russell was only half a tenth away from Lando Norris. And that top 3 didn't do a second run. Or, well, they didn't improve again. They may have done a second run, but they didn't improve their lap time anymore compared to their first run. So, more pace in the bag. Possibly. As Nib says, Oscar pole in the chat. Would be great if he could do it. Get his first pole position of the year. And I think, would it be his first pole of his F1 career? I can't remember. I know, obviously, Qatar, he had pole for the sprint. And obviously won the sprint. But I can't remember if he's had pole anywhere else. I don't think so. So, yeah. Must be his first pole position if he does get it. As talking of Piastri, he has been released from the garage as the session has begun. Let me just quickly end the poll in the chat and read out quickly the results. So 201 votes. I asked you guys who will take pole position for the Dutch Grand Prix. 36% of you voted for Max Verstappen. 28% voted for Lewis Hamilton. Obviously doesn't look great now, but, that's in hindsight. 26% went for Lando Norris and only 8% went with George Russell. As Frank says he thinks his top 3 will be Piastri, Norris, and Verstappen. Well, we are about to find out. As there you go. 11 minutes remaining in qualifying. Will it even stay dry for the final 11 minutes? Probably. Yes, it will. But you never know. As we saw last year, the rain, very unpredictable. As the home crowd cheering on Verstappen. And this is Verstappen's toughest test yet at his home Grand Prix. Because the last 3 years, you could argue he's had the fastest car in all those years at this Grand Prix to get the job done. But I don't think that is the case today. As here is Oscar Piastri begins his first attempt at pole position If he can do a 1 minute 10.2 or 1:10.1, that would be a brilliant first lap. As he's had a good lap so far, no mistakes. And 24-1 for the first sector. We'll see how that compares to Verstappen, who's going to come through the first sector in a moment. And Max goes quicker. But as we've said, the Red Bull has been good in the first sector. It's the middle sector where the Red Bull is struggling. As Piastri, a 49.0, very good middle sector. As Lando Norris now does a purple first sector. Max goes slower than Piastri in the middle sector, but not by much. It's very close out there. As here comes Piastri out of the banking to the line. And he does a 1 minute 10.1. That is a brilliant first attempt. But is it good enough for now? Max Verstappen does a 1:10.2 and goes second. Here's Lando Norris. A 1:10.0 and Lando Norris on provisional pole for now. Brilliant first laps by Norris, Piastri and Verstappen. As Leclerc goes up to fourth, what can George Russell do? As he comes through turn 10. And he's a couple tenths of a second down. 3 tenths down on Norris. So this is not a good lap so far. There's Gasly up to 5th. This will put Russell comfortably in 4th. But how close can he get to Lando? To the line. 4.5 tenths away. Not sure if it's possible for Mercedes to get pole here. Because I didn't see any obvious errors or, areas to improve with that lap. With Russell. So, yeah, that's worrying for Mercedes. And maybe the fight is between Verstappen and the 2 McLarens. Which, to be honest, is what I expected the battle for pole to be coming into the weekend. I wasn't expecting Mercedes to be as quick as they were yesterday in practice too. There's a replay of Verstappen through the penultimate corner. And wasn't the smoothest run. And he says double check the floor when I come in. As he's a little moment in turn 13. Not sure that would have cost him being on pole. May have cost him being on the front row, though. As, Verstappen back in the garage. Russell 2 and the 2 McLarens. We've got Lance Stroll on an outlap. Perez, Albon and Alonso have not done a lap time so far. Still in the pits. But I think things are set up very nicely for this final run. Because whilst McLaren have the front row, Max, as long as his car is not damaged, Max is close enough to take pole. And it may have to be from McLaren. They may have to dip into the 1 minute 9s to get the job done. But if McLaren lock out the front row, then especially for the Constructors' Championship, that is a massive result for them. As here comes Lance Stroll. Starting a lap. Probably Not sure if this is going to be his only lap. May have burnt through all of his tyres. I'm not quite sure. But he is coming through the banking of turn 3. And a bit of a wiggle there for Stroll, as we've got 5 minutes remaining in qualifying. Still no rain that I can see. But let's see what Stroll can do. Should go ahead of Gasly. Be funny if he goes ahead of Leclerc, who's currently sat in 5th. Ferrari, I think, will be very happy if they were to qualify in 5th place. And Stroll, so far on this lap, might end up getting ahead of Leclerc. Probably will. Might even get ahead of George Russell for 4th. Very good middle sector in the Aston Martin there. And out of the banking in the final corner, what does Stroll do? It's not a good final sector. Lost 4.5 tenths in the final sector. And he does only go 6th. But that could have been better. I think with a better final sector, definitely could have gone ahead of Leclerc. As Alonso, so far on this lap, not lapping as well as Stroll. But can he have a good or a better final sector than Stroll did? Let's see. Off the banking, to the line. And Alonso does go ahead of Leclerc. So Fernando Alonso, 5th. And 5th and 7th currently for Aston Martin. If they were to get that, that would be a fantastic result for them. As all the other cars piling back onto the track for the final run here in qualifying. And the battle for pole, I think, is between Norris, Piastri, Verstappen. And it could be any of those 3 who ends up taking it. As we're looking at Leclerc here on his outlap, currently down in 6th. As Fernando says, I cannot do more than this. And there is no problem with that because, I mean, the lap he did there was fantastic. Only a 10th behind Russell. And he has got the maximum, I think, out of that car. But here comes Max Verstappen. Can he take 4 poles in a row at Zandvoort? It would be incredible if he did. Let's see if he can. Turn 1. Doesn't quite get the front end in. But it's not a disaster. Into turn 2 and 3. And it's good, but I'm not sure if it's good enough. And the first sector is a personal best, but he's a 10th and a half down on Norris. As he comes through turn 8, now into turn 9. Really gets the front end in nicely into turn 9. Front end a lot more compliant compared to how it was a couple races ago in Hungary. Lando Norris, purple first sector. A 10th better than he did before, but Verstappen, purple middle sectors. Oh! Oversteer moment through turn 11 and 12. Nearly lost the car. That might just cost him the chance at 4 consecutive poles. Let's see where this lap puts him. He does go quickest, but only by half a tenth. But I'm not sure that is going to be good enough. As Lando Norris goes 3.5 tenths quicker. A 1:09.6. What a lap by Lando Norris. Proving right there that when he's at his best, he's incredibly, incredibly quick. Oscar Piastri, though, still out there as Alex Albon goes up to 7th. almost got ahead of Alonso there. As Leclerc back up to 6th. And Piastri has not improved his middle sector. This is not good enough for Piastri to get pole. Can he get the front row, though, for McLaren? No, he can't. How far away? A 10th away. And that is great news for Max Verstappen, given Lando Norris's record of holding the lead into the first corner. Here comes George Russell. Only 4th, 6/10 of a second away from pole. Mercedes just did not have the pace. But Lando Norris, what a lap. And he has taken pole. And tomorrow has to take advantage of that. Cannot afford to allow Max Verstappen to get ahead of him on lap 1. But there you go. That is qualifying over and done with. Let me go through your final finishing order. Norris on pole, Verstappen 2nd, Piastri 3rd, Russell 4th, Perez 5th, Leclerc 6th, Alonso 7th, Albon 8th, Stroll 9th, Gasly 10th, and then Sainz 11th, Hamilton 12th, Tsunoda 13th, Hülkenberg 14th, Magnussen 15th, Ricciardo 16th, Ocon 17th, Bottas 18th, Zhou 19th, and Logan Sargent will start at the back, probably from the pit lane. But there you go. That is qualifying over and done with. Remember, guys, I won't be live for the race tomorrow, but I will be doing a podcast reviewing the Dutch Grand Prix. And, well, you can hear my voice. Probably best I don't stream tomorrow. But, yeah. Good end to qualifying and a brilliant lap by Lando Norris. That is his best qualifying performance of the season. To out-qualify Max by nearly 4/10 of a second is incredible. Especially at Zandvoort. But let me just set up the poll quickly to ask, who is your driver of the day for qualifying today? So who is your driver of the day for qualifying at Zandvoort? And the options will be Lando Norris. Who else? I'll put Verstappen in there. And then the other two options who clearly deserve to be in there is Alexander Albon and Pierre Gasly. My driver of the day, though, clearly is Lando Norris. That was a special lap. That lap was Lando at his absolute peak. And when Lando's at his peak, he's a great driver. There's no doubt about it. But these last few races, he hasn't consistently been doing that. But if he does, a lot more of what we just saw on a much more consistent basis, then, maybe the championship fight isn't over. We'll have to see. But one thing we do have to say, though, is so Norris ended up 3.5 tenths ahead of Max. How much of that was the car? I don't think all of it was the car. I think Lando did genuinely produce an amazing lap. But McLaren, clearly quicker than Red Bull. And given how short of a lap it is, pretty worrying, I'd have to say, for Red Bull for them to be that far off pole around such a short track. So, yeah. I mean, we'll see what happens tomorrow. Maybe Max gets into the lead and controls the race and ends up winning. But McLaren, as we've said, the pace is there. It's about delivering. And a bit disappointed with Piastri at the end there. Because I think McLaren probably should have had the front row locked out. But Piastri's middle sector was, and I think also final sector just wasn't good enough. So, yeah. It's all about delivering when it matters, and Lando is the guy who did that. I mean, Max had a little mistake in turn 11 and turn 12, but ultimately it wouldn't have mattered because Lando was way too quick for Max. And yeah, 109.6, that is a incredible lap time. So we can't just say that it's all the car. I think, you got to give Lando his credit. That was a proper special lap. I think that's probably one of the best laps Lando's ever done, qualifying wise. So yeah, full credit. Nib says Oscar's middle looked terrible on the onboard. I didn't quite see what it looked like on the onboard, but yeah, the sector times just fell away, unfortunately. I don't think Piastri had the pace for pole, but I think McLaren will be disappointed that again he isn't on the front row, because really I think McLaren should be locking out the front row. But as Looney Classics just said in the chat, the McLaren is now the best car. Not around every track, but medium to high aerodynamic tracks, the McLaren car is the best car. That is clear to see. And we've got plenty of those coming up. Obviously, Singapore, COTA, Mexico, or not Mexico. Well, Mexico, they're going to be very quick, but, Qatar, I'm sure they'll be very fast there. Obviously, Abu Dhabi. So, McLaren, with the pace they've got at the minute, and as well, I think you have to say that upgrade McLaren brought has worked, because in practice they didn't look like they had the clear fastest car, but clearly in qualifying they did. With what their pace is like now, McLaren should probably win another 4 or 5 races this year. Is it a dry race tomorrow, Suzuki Classic? Yes, it will be dry tomorrow. I've looked. It's going to be a mostly sunny race. So yeah, no weather concerns for tomorrow. Yanni says, have a shot of brandy before bedtime, Chaz. Well, what is it? My sleeping pattern has been absolutely just awful the last week or two, mainly because I've been ill. But what is it? Yesterday I woke up at 4 p.m. and since then I've only had 2 hours sleep. So once I'm done here, I think I definitely would have earned a good sleep. And then I can sit back and hopefully enjoy the race tomorrow. But like I said, even though I won't be doing a race watch along tomorrow, as soon as the race is done, I will be recording the podcast and I will try to get it out late Sunday night so that you guys can hear it a bit earlier. Because like I said earlier, I've got plans on Monday afternoon. So, yeah. Mickey says, where do you think Perez will finish in the race? Probably where he's at. I don't think he has the pace to beat the four drivers in front of him, unless he has, like a really good start to the race. But yeah, I mean, if Max can somehow win and Perez finish fifth, that's a great result for Red Bull, considering that Perez has not been a factor at all for Red Bull. That'd be what 35 points, which would outscore McLaren and keep them at bay for another race. So we'll see. But that first corner is going to be very exciting tomorrow. And if Max gets into the lead, it is going to be very interesting to see what McLaren's reaction is, especially Lando Norris. Can he hold the lead into turn one? Something he's been pretty bad at across his F1 career. So, yeah, we will see. Say regards as Hamilton awful, absolutely. Hamilton, I'd say worst performance of qualifying easily, given that I mean Mercedes in the end weren't as quick as I thought they would be, but Russell fourth on the grid, Hamilton should be sixth at worst, not 12th. It's embarrassingly bad. Looney Classic says Lewis should start on hard tyres and hope for a safety car. Let me just see what tyre compounds they've brought. Because I want to see, I want to see if they've brought like the proper soft range. So let me have a quick look. Pirelli. Oh, so they've brought the 3 hardest compounds. So that's the thing. When Pirelli bring the 3 hardest compounds, that hard tire, I mean, it's very obviously good for durability, but it doesn't have any pace in it because it's too hard. So I don't think you're going to see the hard tire as much as maybe you would think. I think you'll see it, but I don't think starting on the hard compound tire is a good choice. It'd be a much better choice to start the medium. I think the hard tire is too hard. Will F1 says, Lando, great lad, but the car is capable of performances like this. Well, yeah, true. But, with Lando, let's see what he does tomorrow. If he bottles another race win, then mentally, I think he's finished. Not, totally, but for this season, certainly. But, right. I'll go through a couple more comments. And then we'll come to the end of the stream here. Rook saying, I swear Chazar is on Australian time. Most time. Pretty much. I mean, my sleeping pattern has always been actually more favoured, I'd say, towards like the American time zone. More specifically, say the West Coast of America. It's just always been that way. Because on the internet, on YouTube, there's more stuff going on in terms of like live streams and that between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. because obviously, the most popular content creators are American. So, yeah. So that's normally why, those are my prime hours. Mickey says, I'm going to guess the FIA won't give Lewis a penalty now. He's already in 12th. If this will even go to anyway. I mean, we'll see. Maybe they'll take that into account, but sometimes they are, the stewards, some weekends they're lenient, some weekends they're brutal. So, yeah. They're saying Chaz and I reverse sleep schedule. Exactly. Looney Classic says, but Lewis can easily dispatch about 7 cars in front of him. I don't agree with that. I mean, Stroll, Gasly, Albon, yeah, but given how hard it is to overtake here, I don't think he easily dispatches the 2 Ferraris or Alonso for that matter. So, yeah. If Lewis Hamilton finishes in the top 5, I think that would be a good result because he's got some obstacles in front of him. Like I said, 2 Ferraris and Alonso, the clear ones, and Sainz. Well, yeah, I said Sainz, didn't I? 2 Ferraris. But you know what I mean? It's not a clear path through to, to the top 5. He's going to need a bit of luck as well if he's to get a top 5. But guys, there you go. That is the qualifying watch along for the Dutch Grand Prix. Thank you guys for coming along for this first watch along after the summer break. And like I said, I won't be along for the race watch along tomorrow. But I will be uploading a review of the Grand Prix later on Sunday as part of my podcast. It should be episode 6 of the podcast. So that's what I'll be doing. And remember, next weekend for the final European race at Monza, I will be doing both a qualifying and race watch along. And of course, Niblo, who's in the chat, will be along with me for the race watch along. So don't worry, race watch alongs are not far around the corner. But yeah, not expecting a lot of overtaking tomorrow, which is really why I'm not going to do a race watch along tomorrow, because it's going to be a dry race and I just don't see in a dry race at this track how you could really have that great of a race. I mean, we had the Belgian Grand Prix at Spa, the last Grand Prix, and we didn't have a lot of overtaking in that one, and it's a lot easier to overtake at Spa. So, yeah. But thank you for coming along to this. It's been great to have you. Let me just finish up the poll in the chat. 25 votes and a clear winner in this poll once it shows up in the chat. And I wait for it to show up in the chat. There you go. 72% of you voted for Lando Norris. Yeah, clearly driver of the day. 15% went for Max Verstappen, 7% for Alex Albon, and 3% for Pierre Gasly. But yeah, thank you guys for coming along. Been great to have you guys. And yeah, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Also, what do you call it? Make sure to join my Discord server, link below in the description. Make sure to check out some of the other content on the channel. Make sure as well, if you haven't hit the like button on the stream yet, to do so. Really does help my channel and the algorithm, and obviously shows me that you guys actually enjoy the content. So yeah, if you could do that, that would be great. But yeah, thank you guys for coming along. And until my next watch along this time next week for qualifying at Monza, which is always brilliant. And until my next video, which will be tomorrow's podcast reviewing tomorrow's Dutch Grand Prix of 2024 at Zandvoort. Until then, guys, it has been me, Chazar HD. Goodbye.